welcome to the first edition of MOE Conversations. My name is Dr. Nyan Dolly, and I serve as your Minister of Education of Trinidad and Tobago. And I will be leading this series as we explore some of the more interesting aspects of our education sector. We will speak to interesting people and look at some of the things that we may not have known are happening in Trinidad and Tobago. I welcome you as you come along with us on this journey. So, for our first edition, we have two very interesting people here with us, and we have Dr. Deborah Bartholomew and her son, Rowan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is wonderful to have you, and wonderful to be exploring some of these interesting things with you. Deborah, let me ask you, give us a little background as to yourself and Rowan.
Well, I'm a medical doctor. Rowan was a typical toddler up until the age of three, and then he started, a little before that, he started having what I found out afterwards were meltdowns. He would cry for hours upon end, and every day. And eventually, it didn't sit right with me, and I myself took him to be assessed because I didn't think that was a normal part of development. And he hit all his milestones. Just one thing he didn't quite do, but I mean, I was told that's normal,
average,
you know. And so I actually was not expecting a diagnosis like autism. I didn't quite know what it was, but I didn't like the tone in which it was said, and what came after. All that came after was he may not be able to, he may never.
No positives.
No positives at all.
Okay.
You will have to take him out of the school that he's in right now. He was like I said, 3. He can't function in that school. He won't. That's all you. Right. That's all you heard.
Can't,
so
won't,
yes,
never.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And
it's so unfortunate because I think there are a lot of upsides to autism.
Yes.
And one of the things people speak about is the fact that you should presume that they can.
Yes.
Presume
Yes.
that they can do it.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to hear what happens at the first diagnosis. It's can't and it's can't. And of course, as you said, Rowan, that's unfortunate because you can't you?
Yeah.
You definitely can.
I met some educators recently, and they said to me that well, one of their charges is in his 30s. Actually, 2 of them, a man and a woman, they're in their 30s, and you know they can't possibly learn right now, and because it's too late. And I said, well, why?
Never too
and
late,
they said,
is it?
and they said, well, but they're in their 30s. And I said, how many of you here are in your 30s? And they said, all of us. And I said, and yet here you are. So
Right.
I think it's just the way that information is presented. And
So, you know, I heard this one quote: "Life is about learning. When you stop learning, you die."
So Ron, where did you go to school? After all of this can't, where did you go to school?
I was probably a little too young to remember my days in daycare. I did go to this one place called Happy Vale.
yeah, that was nursery. So Rowan started out in Happy Vale Montessori. Actually, he had another Montessori before that. Things weren't quite working out.
So that was a regular Montessori school.
Regular
So
Montessori,
you started out in regular school after the diagnosis.
Yeah, but it wasn't going well at all. They weren't communicating much with me, but I knew things weren't right. I mean, I would pick Ron up, and he would have sand or gravel in his hair, and I found out later on that he would actually be in the toilet, and they barely spoke to him for the day.
So the regular school was difficult for him at that time.
Yes.
And so from regular preschool, you put him where now?
Well, actually, I was advised to take him to the Life Center. And we went to the Life Center, and they said, no, most of our students are globally delayed or challenged. So let's get somebody in. So actually, the aide that we got, and she doesn't quite go as an aide now. I mean, she's more like a facilitator and a support. But she went in, and she, because of her interaction with Rowan, the teachers started to change their perception of Rowan, because initially what they thought, that's right, because initially what they thought was that I was a parent who was in denial, because I was insistent that my child should go to regular school, and that also that he was ill behaved. But what they realized was that this child was just autistic. They didn't know they didn't know about autism. So in that short space of time, I think it was a month, they got a crash course in how to deal with a child who's autistic.
And that came from the intervention of an aide.
That's right.
In a regular school.
In a regular school. That's
right.
And I mean, she taught me a lot. You know, one of the most important things that she taught the teachers was how to communicate with him. Especially when he was overwhelmed.
Okay.
And that is for me one of the key things that even now I think when I talk to parents and I talk to teachers, it's funny enough not something that is always filtered through or filtered down. It's not something that remains consistent, and that is to communicate via visuals.
Right.
So after Happy Vale, we went abroad.
Because my dad's a geophysicist, so he was, I think, posted
in India.
Yeah, so we went like all over the place, mostly around the Middle East.
But the thing is that regardless of where we went, he was rejected
from the regular system.
Yeah. And so the American School of Bombay, they said he had behavioral issues, but the school that he ended up in, which was an Indian school, the teachers.
I call them on the L, it's called, which is French for World School.
Okay. The teachers there were not special trained. There was a psychologist on board who still is in contact with us actually, and a special ed teacher. The teachers weren't special trained, but they taught him, and it's so funny because he had been in school for a couple of months, and we went to the bazaar for the American school. And they saw him, and they came to me, some of the teachers, and they said, "Is that Rowan?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh, I'm gonna talk to the principal and let's see if we could get him back into school, because his behavior has changed." And that, the minute she said that, I was just like, okay, his behavior hasn't changed. He's learning to process, and he's being taught in a different way. And so I thought, you know what? They actually sent me an email saying they would like him to come back to their school, and I said, thanks, but no thanks. He's happy where he is.
So once he got the type of interaction that was understanding of what he needed, then his whole experience was different.
And that could vary from in different ways. For instance, there was a time when now the thing with autistics is that they're not necessarily in tune with their feelings. Not that they don't feel. So Rowan is hypersensitive to, they also have hypersensitivity, so he's hypersensitive to smell. And we are talking about a canteen that sells mostly Indian food.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very...
That's when I made the jump from kindergarten to first grade, I think.
Yes. And so Rowan would have a meltdown at the beginning of lunch or just before lunchtime, and we didn't understand why. And then around 1 o'clock, around 1:15, Rowan would have another meltdown, and we didn't understand why. And then I started trying to figure out, asking teachers, and then I started looking at Rowan would bring back his lunch from school. So I kept asking Rowan, are you eating? But he wasn't telling me anything, and it turned out that Rowan he could not handle the smell in the canteen. It was overpowering. But you had to eat in the canteen. That was a rule.
He couldn't eat.
That's right. So he couldn't eat. So he had the meltdown because he couldn't.
Because it, quite frankly, smelled horrible.
So he had
just too much.
It was too much. Yeah, it was too much. It was really it was too overpowering. So he had the meltdown because he didn't know how to communicate that he couldn't handle the smell. And then the second meltdown was because he was hungry.
Hungry now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Rowan, you just graduated from QRC.
Well, graduated from
Form 5.
Well, currently getting some things. I'm trying to get some things sorted. For me, making the jump to 6th form.
Right. Tell us a little bit about your experience. Did you attend QRC from Form 1?
Yep.
straight up to Form 5.
Yeah.
How was that experience for you?
Well, it wasn't too bad. I had a bit of experience before from all the other schools I've been to, so I kind of knew the drill from there. So it was pretty much smooth sailing.
Did you have an aide with you at school?
Yeah, but you would only visit like twice a week.
Okay.
And only for an hour
Yeah.
or so. And it was more to make sure that he was on top of his work and to work with the teachers, you know, to see if he had any challenges. I mean, he really did well because he was at a special school when he did SEA.
Okay.
There were many schools that wouldn't take him, and we ended up settling at that school. I think there were like about 10 kids in his school, if so much, and then to go to school.
Actually, when I first joined, there was there was 4 kids in there,
right,
plus me.
Okay.
Right.
So it's 5.
Yeah. And then so to make the jump to 700
Yeah.
boys was a real and then QRC is a huge school.
Yeah.
And one of his challenges when we were in Libya, I remember, he couldn't find his friends to play with them at lunchtime because they were all wearing the same uniform, and he couldn't read faces. He can't because they have to learn faces, and he couldn't quite differentiate. So I was a little worried about that, you know.
In that huge atmosphere.
Exactly.
Right.
But I think especially the main thing for Rowan going to QRC was that here it was a school that he's heard about. He's heard that the school is one of the top schools in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, for us, the top school. And there is no, let's see how he does. We'll try to work with him. Well, we'll take one day at a time. It was never that that's not what I was.
You found
told.
acceptance.
Yeah, total acceptance. And when he'd written a speech for
the Autism Awareness launch at the President's Grounds.
He was in Form 1, and he was
I was
having
in Form 1 I was in Form 1 or Form 2?
I'd have been Form 2, and he was having some trouble writing the speech, and so I wrote a speech alongside, and then when he brought the speech to me, I actually deleted my speech because there's no way that I could have the self-awareness, but the acceptance that speech showed that he got from going to QRC, I think meant a great deal, and I think that's something that we don't realize is that everybody wants to be accepted. You know, and that really has gone a long way into making him who he is.
So what advice then would you share with parents who have similar circumstances, who have autistic children, and who would like to see them blossom in the same way that Rowan has blossomed? What advice would you give to parents?
You have advice to give?
Okay. Really the main thing you need to do is try to talk with your children, and if they find something, you know, when they find what they like, just support them, aid them in any way you can.
I think for me, over the years, it's having a relationship with your school, and with the teachers and with the principal. I just recently we had a brilliant, a beautiful surprise when he turned 17. I got teachers from India and his teacher who taught him in Libya, who's now living in Australia. And they actually came on the Zoom, and it was a brilliant surprise. But that's a relationship that we've maintained, because that's important. For instance, if you are if he doesn't have a good night, that's going to affect him at school.
Right.
And it's going to affect him, it's going to affect the teacher's day, it's going to affect his peers. So it's important to have that communication. Actually, what we've done is, from the get-go, what Mr. Simon did was he asked his aide Teresa and myself to come into school, and we had a meeting with the entire staff where we told them what to expect. And then we actually, form teacher, dean, Teresa, psychologist, therapist, pediatrician, and myself, we have a WhatsApp chat where we just, if
share
on whatever,
information.
we just share information. But it's important also, as a parent, to not, your dreams are not your child's. So whatever he wants is what is important. I just need to be the person to be able to to open the way, or not even pave the way, because he's paving the way himself.
To facilitate.
That's right. That's all I can do. My dream can't be that my child must be X or must do Y.
So we had from Rowan that you have to support your child, talk to them and understand them, support them in what they want to do. We are hearing from you, Deborah, that you have to maintain a close relationship with the school, with the teachers, and we're also hearing the importance of the aid and how that would have helped, especially in the formative years coming through the system.
Definitely.
And that's really important as well.
Definitely, because I in the beginning I wasn't even, I remember his school in India, I had to spend half day at school
to be able
just to make sure that nothing happens,
right?
So if there's an aide, and the thing with the aide is that the aide, especially if it's a trained aide, the aide can then teach the teachers how to, and that, I mean, at QRC, Teresa has seen her role change from being the teacher or the teacher to teach the teachers or to guide the teachers, and more to just see where and how role has actually evolved.
Right.
And the teachers themselves are seeing how to read him, how to anticipate when he's anxious and things like that.
And it's been the same aid throughout.
Yeah.
And that's important. That continuity, I imagine, is also important, because she knows him and she's able to interpret.
She knows him really well. But that actually you touched on something that Mr. Simon, actually, it was unprecedented, because he kept the same form teacher right through to make sure that things were not so much of a challenge, because Form 3 was a real challenge. And actually, when we got to Form 3, we thought we might have to think of whether this is going to
continue in the regular system.
And you feel, as a parent, you feel gutted, because you think, but we've always maintained that if he spends one day at QRC, it's one day at QRC, thought that it could never happen.
Exactly.
And
from experience, Form 3 is hard for any parent.
Oh my goodness.
I think Form 3 is the year.
Yes.
Okay, for any parent.
17 subjects.
Actually, that's let go of a few subjects, because
Right. It was just too much.
Yes. Yeah. But then that shows you how important it is to have the communication with the school.
Yes.
Because he was seeing a therapist at the time. She wrote a letter to the school. We had our team meeting. The same thing was conveyed to Mr. Simon. He was like, yes, okay, we will do this, we will do that. It's never been, it must be this way. Or
the individualized attention and the plan and the education plan.
So in fact, we didn't have a written down IEP, but what we actually had was an IEP.
You were developing it as necessary along the way. So that individual attention really would have been necessary to allow him to blossom. So, Rowan, you have done something that many people think is impossible. You are a child with autism, and you have navigated in a regular secondary school, and you have been able to come all through the ranks. How does that make you feel?
Accomplished.
Like Superman, you see, he raised that chest there. I can imagine. It makes you feel accomplished. How does that make you feel, Deborah?
Grateful. Grateful. I thought all the way back. My Facebook post started from the beginning.
Yeah.
All the way down, all the teachers. I can't even remember how many teachers and how many people we listed on, but it just made me really grateful.
It took a huge village.
That's right.
A huge village to do what you had to
That's
do.
our village, Team Ro.
So many people may say that Rowan is exceptional and he had exceptional circumstances, and they would not be able to recreate this level of success because they don't have that particular circumstance. What would you say to a parent who feels that way, looking at this now and thinking, can I give my child the same type of support? What would you say to that?
Can I have this one?
Yeah. Yes.
Rowan has the floor.
Okay. I say this not really from my achievements, but the achievements of so many other trailblazers. My achievements aren't just a yardstick from people to measure. It's not a measurement of success. It's not, but it's just something that you can accomplish if you have the positivity and you have the mindset and you have the willpower. It's something you can accomplish. Mm-hmm. I'm not a yardstick. I'm just an example.
I like that.
Yes.
It's not a competition.
No.
It's inspiration.
Yeah.
It's actually quite important to see that. So
Yeah.
you want me to bring it down?
Inspiration.
Yeah. Okay. So I've had this bit of a public speaking thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've gave quite a few speeches and stuff. So probably one of my most iconic, besides the one at the autism awareness launch,
mm-hmm.
was this one I had at the orientation at Trinity East.
Right.
I compared the journey of life to something like climbing up a mountain. So I was like, imagine if you're climbing up Mount Everest, right? And you have this little backpack of things you need. What would you carry in that backpack? You carry your basic supplies, your tent, your rations, your whatever. But what you also need in this backpack is inspiration. And you find this inspiration inside many people. I've definitely found mine in Mommy primarily, and quite a few other people. Like my grandparents, a few of my teachers, some of the aides I've had along the years. Yeah.
Yeah, so inspiration is very important. And Rowan, I hope you know that you are an inspiration to many other parents as well as students who will be looking at you and seeing what they hope to become.
Thank you.
I remember, and I said this to a couple of my friends. I said, I know that we are unique, but every family is unique, and it's said that when you meet one person on the spectrum, you meet one person on the spectrum. So every child is going to learn in a different way. Mm-hmm. I should say not learn in a different way, but they have different strengths.
Right.
But if you really try to present them with, surround them with as much support as possible, you can find a way. You can accomplish what Rowan has accomplished. Now, not every child is going to be able to attend mainstream school, and in fact, Rowan almost ended up going to Palmyra's, and that's fine. But Mrs. Simon said, when I approached Mrs. Simon, I said, Rowan is autistic, and he looked at me and he said, and I'm like, okay, so what's your point, right?
Now, probably being biased here, and a lot of schools might particularly not want to hear this, but I think QRC is leading by example. It has succeeded where a lot of others have not done so well, and that right there is acceptance. I find just not enough schools are accepting of some people, and you can kind of tell I went through that first time.
And I suppose that's an uncomfortable feeling of not being accepted.
QRC hasn't just let me in the school either. It's actually, like, put in the work to level the playing field.
Right. To properly accommodate. And to be inclusive.
That's right. It's not just about
opening the doors.
No. Because, for instance, I remember one meeting we were having, and we asked if he could have some of the work that they were going to do beforehand. And somebody said, but isn't that going to make it an unfair advantage? And I said, no. That's actually what's going to make it a level playing field.
That's equity.
Because, exactly.
That's equity.
Because what you don't realize, and I said this, I said what you don't realize is that if you're in a classroom and you are delivering whatever part of the curriculum it is, whatever subject that you're doing, and the classroom is noisy, or at any point in time he is overwhelmed because he's anxious or whatever, he has not heard a thing that you have delivered, and then you're going to be giving homework on top of that. But for me as a parent, and the same thing I said, you as a parent, you have, it's not the special educator's job, it's not the teacher's job. You are the first educator, and you are the one. Now there are parents who can't, for whatever different reason. But it's important and it's imperative for the parent to be as present as possible.
In our present circumstance with the COVID-19 pandemic, the role of parenting in education has really come to the fore.
Yes.
And it's outlined and really exposed how much parents have to be involved in this. And I suppose that has been your experience all the time, right throughout, which is why Rowan could say that you are a big part of his inspiration. And I think that is such a wonderful thing for a parent to be in every aspect of their child's life. So, Deborah, I know you'd have played a role in the consultations on inclusive education, and I think you have I know you'd have brought value to that because you've lived what that is, and you made the decision to send your child to a school, a regular school, and to put things in place to see him through that. And therefore, that is the vision. That's the vision that we want to have. Rowan said, QRC didn't just let me in.
Yeah.
They put things in place so that I'm on an equal playing field, and that is the vision for education. And when we say inclusive education, when we say that the education system must cater for all, that's what it means. It means that all of us are not the same.
That's right.
Right? And being autistic doesn't mean that, you have, this is what you are.
Yeah.
It just means that everyone is different, needs different things, and therefore our education system has to ensure that children with whatever the special need is are accommodated, so that we can have more Rowans out there, and we can have more success stories, and we can have more parents who are, so uniquely involved in their life, and therefore the system must cater for that. Because, being special is just that.
That's right.
It just means you're special.
That's right.
That's
so,
right. I agree. Deborah, I want to give you, Rowan, an opportunity to say any last words you want to say of inspiration, Rowan, to parents and to students out there who, may feel a little discouraged, as I'm sure some days may have felt for you.
Can I go before you?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I know that Rowan may seem as, because you mentioned that people might think that Rowan is an exception. When I was in Libya, I had the opportunity to teach pre-nursery students. And I met one day when I went, now I'm not a trained teacher, and when I got to class, I met a father clutching his son. And he said to me, I needed to talk to you because I want you to just include my child. Just teach him. He's not normal. I was told he's not normal, but just teach him, please. And and exactly, you know who I'm talking about. And I said to him, well, he's 2.5 years old. All I know that they need at this stage, especially, is love. Mm-hmm. And because of my experience, I think that I was placed in that child's life for a reason. But because of my experience with my own child, and I took the dad, and I said, I told him about this child who was rejected from school after school, and now he's thriving and whatever. And then I took him to meet Rowan. Rowan comes outside, and he has no clue of what I'm about to do. And he comes up and says, "Hello, how do you do?" Because I told him that Rowan also wasn't speaking whatever. And this gentleman, he just was like, "Oh my goodness," he said, "thank you, you've given me so much hope." And he said, "I wish I could hug you." And he's Muslim, right? So he said, "I wish I could hug you. Thank you so much, thank you so much." And we continued working, and I had aids because most of my kids did not speak English. And I was teaching them English through song, right, so Sesame Street stuff. And we were singing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know that song? Mm-hmm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I stopped halfway to correct one of the students, and everybody stopped. And the first child to count to 10 by himself singing, even though he had a lisp, but it was this child. And everybody stopped and they applauded him. And after that, every single aide treated him differently. Of course, Libya went through Civil War and stuff, and I lost contact with them.
That was traumatizing. Yeah. 2011. That was traumatizing to say the least.
And I was contacted by the father, and I asked how he was doing, and he sent me a clip of this child speaking in French, fluent French with his sister. And it just goes to show you how if you can close a door on a life that has so much promise. We don't know. And that was what my impetus was, that I didn't know. Yeah. And Teresa always says at his age, she always says this, we don't have a crystal ball. So nobody knows what that child will turn out to be. And so you can't stop trying.
Presume competence. Yeah. Presume competence.
Exactly.
Ron, what are your closing words for us?
Well, to quote another of my speeches, know yourself. Know who you are. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to be your crazy kooky self. Don't be afraid to make random references that no one will get. So don't be afraid to be you.
Don't be afraid to be you. Ron, you seem to have extensive recall.
Yes. That's not so good for me.
A short time I picked that up. Ron, don't be afraid to be yourself. And I think that brings us to a wonderful close of today's program. And I'm really, really happy to have been joined on the first edition of MOE Conversations with Dr. Deborah Bartholomew and Rowan. I'm pronouncing that carefully because he hates it when people mispronounce his name.
So, although I do prefer Rowan, what the schwa is there.
Rowan.
I don't mind Rowan.
Okay, all right. But he's very a little accommodating, all right? So thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you so much, Rowan, for joining us today. It is wonderful to have spoken to you. And as we wrap up, we speak to all children with special needs. We speak to the parents, and we ask you to remember the words of Deborah and Rowan. Don't be afraid to be yourself. We remember the words of Deborah in saying that every child has the potential. We don't have a crystal ball, so we don't know what's wrapped up inside of those packages. And so we close today's edition of MOE Conversations with that message of hope that all children should be presumed competent. Thank you so much for joining us today.